And welcome to Coffee Connection Live. We are so happy you're here with us, and we're really excited today to be with Natalija Quinn, who's coming to us from the DC area. There she is. Good morning, Natalija. Can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'd love to. Good morning. So I am in the DC area now, but I actually was born and raised here as well. So I've kind of come home full circle, and was in Northern Virginia, went to school in Virginia. I'm a total DC area native, and my family still lives here. My parents, I actually currently live 10 minutes from my childhood home. And mom and dad are close by, which is great because I have little kids, and I, have been here for forever, it seems.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Now, we know that you used to be an Army spouse when your husband was in the, well, I said Army. Was he in the Army?
Yeah.
Okay.
4 years of active duty Army.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so take us back to the beginning. What was life like for you before you were a military spouse? And then how did you meet your husband? And what is life like, or what was it like both personally and professionally while your husband was on active duty?
Sure. So we met in Baltimore. Actually, I think you're supposed to say Baltimore if you're from there. I was working and living downtown in DC. I was a legal assistant at the time. I was pretty young, graduated college. Moms that told me I could go to law school or medical school. And so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with myself. I was working 2 jobs at the time because I wanted to live in DC, and the cost of living there is exorbitant. And I went to go visit a really good friend of mine up in Baltimore, and we actually met Mike out at a bar. So that happens. And, I think that this is actually not uncommon in the military world necessarily. 6 months later, we were moving to San Antonio together. And that was like the kickstart into my military life, which was startling because I had no prior exposure to it. I remember actually landing in my first kind of FRG meeting, which I'm sure a lot of military spouses have familiarity with. And we were chit-chatting, and the battalion commander, I got like this welcome, here's this giant book with all of the acronyms, welcome to the Army family. And I just remember sitting there and thinking, I have no idea, like it's a whole nother language. So it really felt like a kind of a whirlwind. Personally, we moved 7 times in 9 years, which is not necessarily unheard of, but still I think a little bit more frequent. So that, that I remember getting to San Antonio and looking for jobs. I had quit my job because I couldn't, take it with me. And that was challenging, trying to find something that was stable, moving around. And I really actually struggled with kind of that identity crisis of I was at that moment where I really wanted to find myself and build a career, and it just was always really drilled into me to be this successful career woman. It was something that I wanted, and all of I really found that to be challenging. But on the being a military spouse and being welcomed into that community and having that family was pretty incredible. So I did as many do, and I got involved with the FRGs and did just an incredible amount of volunteer work between that and Red Cross at different installations. And I was part of the care team, which I don't know if folks are familiar with that, but that's like casualty assistance training, and really was an incredible journey to kind of be a part of that family. It was a great experience. I loved it.
Were you able to, you said that you volunteered a lot. Were you able to work professionally outside the home, or were you 100% doing volunteer work at that time?
Yeah, it was mixed actually. So predominantly volunteer work. So I kind of bucket it in two things. You know, I call it like the W-2 work, where you're actually on payroll, and then all of the volunteer work. So during a deployment, I actually moved back to the DC area, and I worked in government contracting and in management consulting, which is what I do now. But predominantly, I did a lot of volunteer work with the family readiness group and other groups, and it was, you know, I think it's definitely something where, especially now and trying to build a career, and you know, when you're looking for work, for whatever reason, we try to like not allow ourselves to feel like that is something that should count as work. I think that was super challenging for me to feel like, you know, the hours that we put in. I mean, if you think about it, there are events that you're fundraising for, you know, treasures for, you know, building budgets for these groups. I mean, there are real jobs associated with being a part of that group. And for whatever reason, I think a lot of times we really struggle with allowing ourselves to give that recognition officially on paper, because we feel like if we weren't getting a paycheck for it, it doesn't really count. So I definitely had a lot of volunteer work within that stretch amount of time.
Yes, I'm shaking my head over here because I completely understand that. There seems to be almost a stigma, and not even just within the military spouse world, but in the professional world in general, a stigma about volunteer work. If you're not getting paid for it, then it doesn't go on the resume. And it can be everything from FRG life to what you do as a mom, right? Running the household and managing the budget. So for many military, all of this volunteer work means that there's most likely a gap on the resume of the W-2 work, as you say. So how would you advise military spouses who are watching this today to sort of take that volunteer work and translate it into, you know, hard skills that they can put on a resume to make them more marketable when they are looking for a W-2 job again?
Yeah, I think that with that, it kind of, you know, of course you want to be thinking about like, what is it that you're actually doing, right? If it's some sort of management job, I even have, for some of the positions that I've filled within the contracting space, you know, sometimes they're looking for to be able to hit a certain category within that contract. You have to show like 20 years of past work experience, and in your mind, like, okay, well, you know, maybe 20 years ago, I'm a server, you know, at a restaurant, and that was my work experience at the time. Like, is that something that I can put in there? And I think we just kind of have to shift it and find like, what are those qualities that you can extract from those positions that apply to what you're doing. So for instance, like taking that particular situation, you know, do you want to show leadership or management? You know, were you in charge of a shift schedule, or were you a floor supervisor, or were you providing any kind of professional development? Because, you know, 2 years in, you're more senior than the 5 other people that worked there. I really think it's the story that we tell that exists there, but you kind of just have to find it. You know, I was part of those groups continuously from installation to installation to installation, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't necessarily, you know, a break because we PCS'd or I had to realign with another group. And, you know, in my personal resume, I just have it as like this chunk of time because that is what I associated my volunteer work, and I bucketed it all together. And I think that, you know, what's so great about military spouses is that we build that community and that network, and there's nothing to say that, you know, you don't have folks that are willing to validate for you if the time comes to say that, yeah, they were essential, they did perform, you know, these duties and these, you know, I absolutely would write a recommendation letter for them, or I'd be willing to say, you know, to validate like work history or what have you, because sometimes that becomes part of the process too if you're going for a new job.
So bottom line, make sure it goes on the resume. Don't diminish it, right? And
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And maybe work with the command at these places that you were stationed and doing the volunteer work to get letters of recommendation.
Yeah, you can do that for sure. And I, you know, for actually this past job that I started in December, um, I hadn't had my work history traced the same way until I landed here. And even then, like you know, I feel like since we retired, right? Do we still do we say that? Um, you know, I've been working full-time in management consulting, and you know, I had this moment where I was going for a senior position, and you know, they run the background check and they're like, great, you know, tick tick tick, this is this final piece that we need to validate. You have that you were, you know, working with the Army FOG as like I have it, my work listed like a project manager, because that's, you know, the type of work that I was doing. We need proof that you did that. And I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, they're not going to hire me because I don't have a letter that says that I did this. And I just reached out to the battalion commander and asked if he would be willing to, you know, write a letter for me confirming that I did, you know, I did that. And without a doubt, I had it back within, I think, 12 hours, and I forwarded it off and they were like, perfect, this is great, thanks, you know, and just check of a box. So sometimes I think that we, you know, we kind of overthink it a little, and we do ourselves a little bit more damage than good, and it doesn't have to be as stressful as we make it out to be.
That's really good advice. That's really good advice. Thank you. I want to pause and check in with Danielle and Nicole in the chat box. Do we have any questions popping up or anything being talked about in there right now?
Thank you. I think you're on the same wavelength because you actually answered a question before we even got to it. So just, you know, some interest in hearing more of your insights, Natalija, on how you were able to leverage that volunteer experience. So thank you for adding on to that. And I was just throwing something in the chat saying, yep, guilty. You know, we definitely overthink it and stress out about it. And the way you just told the story, it was like, wow, yep, getting crazy. And then you're like, oh, that was it. Okay, I did it. So thank you for sharing that. That's and we're seeing other people agreeing as well. So other than that, no questions have popped up.
All right, thank you, Danielle. Well, I do want to touch a little bit more on your transition then from military lifestyle to civilian lifestyle. What was that transition like, not only for your husband, but for you and your family? What was it like to go from military life to civilian life?
It was really hard. It was challenging. So we were coming back from being overseas in Japan, and we kind of knew that it was going to be the last duty station for us. So, you know, we had looked at some job opportunities for Mike and where we could land. And my preference was, you know, my kids were incredibly young. I had just had my second. And I wanted to be back in the DC area because, again, I was, you know, because of all the volunteer work, while great, I still had in the back of my mind, like, I want to be doing more. There's just so much of kind of feeling like you lose a little bit of that identity in, you know, pursuing a career. I had peers of mine that I'd gone to school with that were like directors at these companies, and things that I was like ready to kind of tackle. And so Mike traveled 50% of um, and so I wanted to be close to family. So we chose being back here in the DC area. I actually had been, you know, looking for permanent work, and was volunteering at my kid's school, and found, you know, just in a coffee conversation, actually, had connected with somebody, a woman who was a small business owner in government contracting, and we, you know, made a connection. I ended up working with her. She became a wonderful mentor for me. And, you know, at that time, Mike was just beginning to approach that transition. So, you know, he had great support from his boss within his battalion, the command sergeant major, and got a lot of time to really start to prepare himself. And I was working full-time, little kids, and, you know, Mike that transition was, he was depressed, like, for a lack of a better word. And it is really challenging as, you know, somebody to watch your significant other going through that process, and understanding how challenging it is, because for so long you kind of know at the end of the day you're going to have a next step, you're going to have the next place to go, you're going to have this. And we knew where we were, and we knew that we were transitioning, but all of a sudden it's like, I'm lost, right? And it was hard to watch, and feel like you have so much responsibility on your plate with the kids, and they want to do activities, and you're working full time, and you just want to shake them, and say, like, snap out of it. And you know that it doesn't really work like that. And so I found that to be really hard. I was grateful that I had kind of found that job at the time. And so it was still kind of staggered. It wasn't like we were searching for that thing at the same time. But, you know, my mentor kind of became his mentor as well. And it was through that connection that actually Mike ended up finding his first job post-military, and was doing like that soul searching, and LinkedIn kind of, you know, grew out of that transition time as well.
That's awesome. I'm taking this all in because my family and I are about a year away from transitioning out of the military. And so it's starting to hit home, and I'm thinking, gosh, I don't know how I would deal with that. Like you say, when our husbands are active duty, you always know there's going to be a next step. So I've never seen that vulnerability, and I'm just starting to wonder, gosh, how would I deal with that? So thank you for that. You did touch on something that's become quite a buzzword, especially in the military spouse space lately, and that's mentorship. We keep hearing about mentorship, both for active military spouses, but now you're talking about how it helped you with your career journey after being a military spouse. So for those who may not have a mentor to lean on right now, what do you suggest they do to find someone to help them through their journey?
Well, mentorship comes in so many ways, and I have a lot of mentors that I lean on, and it doesn't have to. I think in our minds we kind of think of, you know, somebody that's older and wiser and has been through it, and that's one type of mentor. But I have really also leaned heavily on peer mentors, and those can be friends, those can be family members, all types of people. I really think that just searching within like the network that you know and starting there and having open conversations, you know, I think one of the really amazing qualities about military spouses is that we're kind of forced with every time that we move to leverage the ability for us to create new connections and meet new people. You know, we have to build a community, and we realize how important that is. Whether we, you know, consciously realize that or not, like, you know, you need that support because you might not have your family nearby. So you create that support network for yourself, because otherwise, like, how do you get through the travel? How do you get through the deployments? How do you get through the long days? And understanding that social connection is really important. I think that we all value that. And we feel it in the times that we don't, which is again, like why those FRG groups are so important and why volunteering is so important. It gives us that outlet. So I think, you know, even starting through peers or connecting back with classmates, perhaps, you know, rekindling old friendships that can lead into mentorship or ideas on, you know, hey, I really think that you could connect with this person. It's amazing just looking at, you know, the people that are directly around you, and getting to know them a little bit better can open so many doors. And that's like just a really grassroots kind of way to find that person that could provide some of that mentorship support.
So I want to hear more about what life is like for you now. I want to hear about how you got the job that you're in now. And to be fully transparent with everyone watching, when Natalija and I spoke a few weeks ago to get to know each other before this call, she told this story, and I just think it's wonderful. So Natalija, will you share with us the story of how you got your job today and how it sort of ties in with the sidebar fact that your husband is a well-known LinkedIn guru, who often gives advice on how to maximize your exposure on LinkedIn, I guess we'll say. But also I want to hear about how you make it all happen with a busy career, with both you and your husband working, and you do have small children at home. So what's life like for you right now?
Sure. So the job bit first, there had been like a natural end to my previous work. So I've been working, the Department of Veterans Affairs is my client, and I do consulting work in IT and IT health specifically. And sometimes there's kind of a natural end to, like, say, the contract that you're working on, and you know, you might start to look around about what other opportunities there were, and some initial jobs that I had been looking out and reaching out to, and making some connections on. You know, some of them were just really heavy on travel, none of them felt right. Mike's LinkedIn had been picking up, and so he was working around the clock, and it would just, you know, none of those seemed kind of like a right fit. So I took a position with a company that, you know, was actually working with the same client that I was, and it was kind of an easy transition over. But you know, a new company with folks that I didn't know. It was much larger than my previous company. We were all remote, which was actually a huge bonus for me, especially at the time with the small kids and everything else, and a major deciding factor of why I took it. And it felt like it was a good time to kind of sit back and take a breather. You know, this is an easy transition. Everything else around me is super hectic. But, you know, at the same time, like, you kind of start to get that itch, where you feel like you want to be doing more. So I'd been going to some events, just VA type events, networking events. I had been going to some events that were tied specifically to my job. And through that, I met some folks within the VA. And after one of the events, we were chatting, and I actually like ended up just on a whim taking a selfie or asking for a selfie with Dr. Lawrence, who's at VBA. And Mike is always like, oh, you need to be posting more. You need to be posting more. I still hear it. It's like from sun up to sundown, like, have you posted today? And I'm totally guilty of not doing it enough. But I had taken this photo, and I said, okay, well, I'm just going to post this here. I'm going to talk about what I was doing. And I posted it on LinkedIn, and within 20 minutes, I had an email from my CEO, who he had no idea who I was. We were in a 400-person company. I had connected with him, when I was coming over, but who's Natalija Quinn, project manager, blah, 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 works remotely, like no clue who I was. But he saw the post and emailed me and said, hey, this is amazing. Let's chat. And, I love what you're doing. And so from there, it just kind of sprang into, a whole other realm of opportunities to grow within my company. I then, like the next couple of weeks, my chief growth officer was calling me and saying like, hey, Natalija, I really, we have this internal initiative. It's a little bit extra, but I think, it came up at our managers retreat and everybody else volunteered, but I think that you would be perfect. Can you take this on? I'm asking you directly to do this. And it was, social media related. And so I went from, doing my project management work to also then working with a team and creating policies for my company and managing our company's LinkedIn account and giving my CEO tips on, how to post and how to, leverage his network. And it even turned into, I had the opportunity to do a presentation. We had an all hands and, getting up in front of 400 people and giving a few tips and tricks to my peers on, how to leverage their networks and connect. And it was, just phenomenal to be able to then create these relationships with our C-suite. And, for, again, a remote employee who doesn't go into the office, to be able to just have that experience, I think was really great. And, I think there are times in our lives where we really need that reminder that, we have the ability to do these things. I oftentimes I think that we have these doubts within us or a lot of negative talk, and it's kind of like that affirmation that you can stand up and you really can, get in front of 400 people and give a speech and do whatever you want to do. And it was a great segue into the job that I landed now. I think the timing of that really helped me feel confident to do things like salary negotiation and other stuff, just because which is terrifying, just to have these bigger conversations that I don't think that I was previously ready to have. So it helped in so many ways.
I think lots of us are intimidated by salary negotiations. I mean, among many other things when you're applying for a new job, but I think lots of us struggle with the confidence and request or even suggest a starting salary that's higher than what you had before. So kudos to you on that. I'm kind of following up on what you said, but do you have any tips maybe on the kind of research that needs to happen or what to do if you're about to go into that kind of situation and you're ready to ask for more money?
I think so. There are Glassdoor, you can try to Google it. If it's a large enough company where there's a certain amount of polling in place where they have some of the data there, that's a resource that you can kind of get an idea on, but sometimes the data is just not really out there. In a lot of ways, again, kind of going back to the network, I have found that through some of the relationships that I have built, obviously there are some that end up just becoming, you know, I have clients that have become friends, and I have, you know, network folks that, again, that I've met that have become, you know, closer friends, where you know, you kind of have to feel it out, but there are certain people that you have walked down that similar path where you're like, hey, listen, this is what I'm thinking. Does that make sense to you? Is that totally off? And you know, that's a scary conversation to have too, right? It's an uncomfortable one, and some of it just relates to, like, salary wise, like, where are you geographically? Like, that plays into it. What kind of, you know, salary level is it? And I think sometimes, you know, it really just comes down to finding those people that, you know, maybe it's not directly asking somebody within your network, you know, what salary should I be asking for, but more like, how do you have that conversation? How do you do that salary negotiation? And sometimes more of that information comes back to you if you are asking it the right way, like, versus directly asking it. You can get kind of a feel from them, and then maybe they'll offer more information that's you know, helpful without you having to necessarily ask, like, I'm gonna ask for this. Does that make sense to you? It is. It's a hard one.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to pause and see if we've had any questions come into the Q&A box, or if anything's popped up in the chat box. Danielle, how are we looking?
Yes, we have a couple questions that have popped up, and the chat is going. I'll tell you guys, I think we're, all of us, just kind of opening up a little bit about, you know, yeah, we are a little hesitant to get out there on, you know, LinkedIn, for example, and you know, someone shared their vulnerability that they're just really not on there. They don't feel very accomplished lately. So it's great to just have a place to be honest and say that, and then pick up and encourage each other to, you know, yes, you know, don't sell yourself short. So what you're saying is really resonating, Natalija. A lot of people are expressing that in the chat, and I will get to the couple of questions that have popped up. You may have touched on this, but feel free to add anything else you want. But kind of going back to the transition conversation, any suggestions on how to navigate the transition into the civilian world when you want to change career fields? So again, I know you talked about your story and Mike's transition as well, but if that jars any other thoughts you want to share.
So transitioning, from a totally different career path. I think, you know, if you do have the opportunity to do one of Mike's class, that to me sounds like a branding conversation. And there are a lot of ways to be able to put in either keywords into your profile, or again, find some of the commonalities, like find that threaded story that can, even if like the field itself is different, but you can find ways to create that threaded story that still supports what you want to do. Then it's definitely, people do that all the time. And it just is finding the right way to support the current work that you're seeking with, you know, what you have on your resume currently. I actually would highly recommend some of his resources, because that's his specialty, the whole branding piece. But again, part of that would be, if you're looking for a job in a new field, you know, again, finding connections through LinkedIn and looking for, you know, you can find folks that are either second connections or first connections, and do some searching on, you know, if you know the field that you want to go into. You might know friends of friends that are in that field, and even just getting a feeler and having the opportunity to reach out to them and talk to them about what their field is like and other things. I think all of that information is helpful and can make that type of transition into a different career type less scary.
I just saw that Danielle dropped into our chat box. Tonight at 7:00 p.m. Eastern time, we're having a very special military spouse exclusive edition of Michael Quinn's LinkedIn webinar.
Yeah.
During LinkedIn. So Danielle put all the information in the chat box. And if you all are able to register and join us tonight for that, I'm sure it's going to be very, very helpful.
Yes, we look forward to it. And thank you for that, Natalija. I'll get to the other question that came in. And I feel like it's related to one I may have seen earlier in the chat. So just a friendly reminder, if you threw a question in the chat earlier and we haven't addressed it, please go ahead and share it once again in the Q&A box. That way we'll make sure that we get to it. So yes, for anybody out there wondering why your question didn't get answered. All right, so the one we have here now is going back to kind of that job searching process. A lot of recruiters put a lot of stock in titles and dates of service. Several even use search engines to weed out candidates that may appear to have jobs that do not fit. Any advice on getting past job titles that may not fit a company's mold, even if you have great experience? That's a tough one.
Honestly, I think that there has been, yeah, well, I will say that there has probably been one job that I have gotten in my career through applying online. It has never been, and I think Mike would say the same thing, like there's a really low success rate in applying online, which I know is not like directly related to the question of the recruiters and them filtering, but I think it does tie back to the fact that you usually will get a job through somebody, or the easiest way I have found and the most consistent and successful way that I have found to find jobs is through your network. And you can connect with recruiters on LinkedIn as well. I think that there are a lot of jobs that are posted on job boards and on LinkedIn where the data is old, where they don't take them down and the job is filled. And, you know, if you're looking on like the USA Jobs site, like that's like a whole different animal because they are running that keyword search, and you know that is a separate animal, and that also actually might be a good question for Mike too. But I have connected directly with recruiters and have messaged with them before and have built relationships and have done like phone screens, and I think that, you know, hands down, that has had such better outcomes than directly applying to some of their jobs. Also keep in mind that a lot of the time, you know, recruiters or folks from other companies, they get compensated, like they get like a referral bonus if you join their company and they referred you. So, and you know, for that process in and of itself as well, you know, if you're directly applying on a website versus getting a referral, the referral, like usually the recruiting team within that company is required to speak to you, versus if you're blindly applying, they can just filter out based off of the keyword search. So usually, you know, if you are looking, you know, at a job at, again, I go back to management consulting because that's what I do, like at a Deloitte or a Booz Allen, which I think a lot of us have heard, you know, and you look for a job, it is much easier to make a connection, find somebody that you know, or, you know, second or third connection, do like an intro to yourself, say, you know, find that commonality between the two of you and reach out to them for a referral prior to blindly recruiting, blindly going straight to, you know, jobs that recruiters have posted, because it's tough. You know, I think that there is so much time not wasted, but, you know, the success rate is so low that you know, I don't think that's the most successful way or efficient way to go about doing it. That is really challenging. I hope that's helpful.
I think it is. You sort of said, you know, it's more about the connections that you make as opposed to what's on your resume being sent just into the.
Yeah, it's this void. I think, I mean, it's such a low % rate of applicants. And if you've ever looked at like just jobs on LinkedIn too, a lot of times they'll have this data that'll tell you, you know, 250 people applied for this position. You know, like, what are you supposed to do with that, right? And at the end of the day, people want to work with, I mean, people are much more willing to kind of fit you to the role, even if you're not a perfect one-to-one match for what they're looking for, if they get to know you and they feel like, I want to work with this person, or this person is a good fit for my company. I mean, that says a lot. And so, you know, I think that they're much more willing to work with you, or even give you some advice on like, hey, okay, so if you can add extra time to your resume, you know, send that to me. I mean, I've had a question like that too. It is definitely so much more about finding ways to connect.
All right. Thank you. I want to get to know you a little bit more outside of the professional world. So tell us what else in life you're passionate about.
Well, kind of loosely related to a professional life. I think that throughout the career, in addition to the incredible mentors that I've had, one of the many careers, kind of going back to, you know, the options of going to med school or going to law school, was that I did at one point, while we were moving a lot, I did also go back to school to go to med school. And with all of the moves, I was finishing up a couple of chemistry classes between all of the moves and trying to do the volunteer work. And then I got pregnant with my daughter, and it was just, I never did it. But what I really had been passionate about was going back to school for women's health. I wanted to be a women's health doctor. And so, you know, now in my professional career, one of the things that I'm really active with and really passionate about is that connection and supporting women within a little bit more now within the professional development side of things. So that's something that I'm super passionate about. I think that there are obviously a lot of military spouses that are both male and female, but some of the things that I have kind of seen throughout my career, and again, kind of going back to the negative self-talk that we seem to do to unquestion our abilities quite a bit, is, you know, along the lines of mentorship, like within building relationships, I've seen a lot of like typical behavior of women in the workplace that I feel like it's like my personal goal to kind of help us all undo. Like, we're all guilty of it. So I do a lot of like peer and one-on-one mentorship with women. I think that we say sorry too much. Like, we're always like apologizing. One of the best, I have this one actual like client who became a friend of mine, and she and I used to respond to each other's emails. Like, it'd be like an email to a group, and then she would respond back and say, never apologize for being right. And so that's something that's like stuck stuck with me. Like there's you know, there's a way to be professional without feeling like you have to apologize for correcting information or other things. So supporting women and, you know, building them up and building those connections and those relationships is really important to me. Also, like you know, obviously the kids take up so much time, and then I am very obsessed with CrossFit and fitness, and that's like the thing that keeps me sane in the day. So I think that's all that I have time for. I don't know how we have
That's a lot.
you know, there's only so many hours in the day.
And right now it seems like there's even fewer hours in the day when we're all at home all day long, right? Are you able to do CrossFit from home? I mean, last month we spoke with a fitness and nutrition expert, and she showed us a workout we could do at home, but I know CrossFit requires things that are a lot heavier. So are you able to do that from home right now?
I do actually have some, like actually my gym is phenomenal. And one of the things that I think is really great about CrossFit, and kind of one of the major reasons why I was so drawn to it, is that it's super community based, and a lot of, you know, there's that whole like cult aspect of it, but really it's like, you know, people being around each other who are cheering each other on and building each other up and working out and feeling the same pain. And there's something like, there's like that camaraderie that you build with it. And it's totally community based, similar to being in a military family. And like, these are the people where, you know, you're on the highway and your tire blows out, like you can pick up the phone and call one of them, and they're going to come, you know, bail you out, no questions asked. You know, a group of us helped clean out a member's family's home who, you know, her sister had to go into like long-term medical care and needed help. I mean, like this is the type of stuff that really like draws you back, and keeps you coming back to have that kind of support. But I do have some equipment at home, probably more than most. But what I think is phenomenal is our gym actually loaned out to its members their equipment. So for free. And a lot of gyms throughout the country did that. So we had members that went and picked up like rowers and kettlebells and dumbbells, and, you know, use it at home. You know, you're all stuck, and it just was amazing. It's been really supportive, and I think we need it. You know, there's so few outlets. We're trying to stay at home. Being able to move your body really helps with the stress of everything going on.
Yes, I agree. And I don't know about you, but just having that hour or whatever amount of time it is to yourself, maybe with music blasting or with your thoughts just to yourself, is so key when you've got kids at home and you're trying to work. And, you know, it seems like every other part of the day is you focusing on someone else. So I completely can relate to that, the fitness aspect, for self-care to keep you sane during all of this, right?
Yeah. It's in my carport though. So it's outside. I used to work out first thing in the morning, and now I'm like, you know, if I'm using a barbell, I don't think that my neighbors would really appreciate me like dropping, you know, 120 pounds of weight on the ground outside at 6 o'clock in the morning. So, I mean, honestly though, that's the smallest price to pay to be able to still have the ability to do that and work out at home. So I'm definitely very, very grateful for that.
Absolutely. So to summarize everything that Natalija has said today, it all started with a selfie.
And it all started with a selfie.
I love this. We're getting close to the top of the hour, so I want to just reach out to everyone who's viewing. Are there any more questions that you all have for Natalija while we've got her? Is there anything in the chat box, Danielle and Nicole, that you would bring up?
Yeah, no questions. I was almost going to say, don't apologize. Drop the weights. Who cares? My husband does it all the time. And
sorry.
I was nervous at first too, and he blasts the music really loud. And I thought, oh my gosh, the neighbors are going to hate us. Turns out nobody cares. So anyhow, we've a lot of
I
other
know.
CrossFitters.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, just go for it. If they don't like it, you can blame it on COVID and find a professional way to apologize without apologizing, right, Natalia?
Yeah. And I see something. How do you keep your home so neat and clean? I am on the porch that got cleaned last weekend. But if I walked inside, it would be a very different story. So it's not. It's
actually really
definitely
nice
not.
to hear
Don't worry.
Hearing the birds chirp has been so relaxing. I feel like we could all just go like bring a masseuse in and hang out on your porch and sip coffee, but like the birds chirping has been really nice in the background.
Yeah, I have a, I was actually nervous. I do have one neighbor too that I think that the way that he's handling being stuck at home is that he's on the lawnmower every other day, and I'm positive the grass does not grow that fast. So
You just
he's,
need
I've
something to
lucked
do,
out.
right?
Yeah.
Danielle, what else do we have?
Well, everyone's agreeing. We all love the birds chirping. So thank you for bringing that to us today, Natalia, amongst all the other wonderful
No
things.
problem.
So many messages of gratitude. You've really resonated with everyone, both on the professional front and even the CrossFit conversation. It sounds like we have some more CrossFitters joining us and people missing their gyms and the community of their gyms. So just so grateful. But other than that, I don't see any other questions popping in. If there's any last minute questions on your mind, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. Seeing lots of thank yous. Thank you all so much for joining us. So Liz, I will give it back to you.
All right, well, thank you. And Natalija, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've got a lot going on. We've heard a lot about it, and I'm sure there's even more we didn't have time to touch on, but thank you for spending this hour with us and for sharing so much of your knowledge and wisdom and experience with us. It is really, really appreciated. And I want to let everyone know that we do have, like was mentioned before, tonight we have Natalija's husband, Michael. Today is a Quinn's takeover of the USO, in case you didn't know. Tonight at 7 p.m., we have Mastering LinkedIn with Michael Quinn exclusively for military spouses. Danielle's going to drop the registration links into the chat box for all of these. And then for upcoming Coffee Connection Live, just like this webinars, on May 22nd, we have Erica McManus, who is the CEO of Instant Teams. She'll be joining us to talk about all things remote work and remote employment right now. And on May 29th, we're really excited to announce we'll be speaking with Leah Esper, who is the spouse of the current Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper. So mark your calendars for both of those. And then we also have 2 Discovering Your Spark webinars coming up. Those are on May 18th at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time and May 27th at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. So all the times that I'm listing off today are Eastern Time, but hopefully you all can join us at some point. Most of these are recorded, and we will drop them on our USO Military Spouse Facebook page as soon as the recordings are ready. So you can find us there as well. Natalija, thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone else, thank you for calling in, and we really appreciate you, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you.